We are live.
We are live. Hello, hello, hello. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of The Chat, everyday conversations on real life issues. We thank you for joining us in and chatting it up with us because you could have done anything else, but we thank you for coming in virtual land to be a part of the discussion on tonight as we talk about mental health stigma. I'm Celeste.
I'm
I'm
Barbara.
Barbara.
And I'm D.
And we are your hosts for the chat. At this time, we're going to turn it over, throw it up to Barb.
I got it. I
She's gonna
got it.
take it from here. You caught it, Barb?
I caught it. So, very exciting evening tonight. Welcome, guests. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh,
So
I'm
tonight's
sorry,
hot
Barb.
topic. Yes.
I forgot one thing. Please, 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 can you share the broadcast? Can you comment on the broadcast and can you like the broadcast? That would help us out. Please do
Yes.
that tonight. Go ahead, Barb. Take it away.
Help us out. Yes. No, that was very important. Thank you. So tonight's hot topic, without further ado, is about breaking mental health stigma in our community. You know, I'm talking about our community, right? So,
Yeah.
what do you do when you must function, and in most instances, at very high levels, in dealing with your family, dealing with your spouse, dealing with your children, dealing with your
Right.
boss, your coworkers, your staff, your friends, your church community? I'm talking to you, Pastor,
Absolutely.
and your bills, right? Can I talk about it? The bills. But you simply want to quit emotionally and physically.
Right.
Well, tonight we're going to have a special guest help us through this conversation. I'd like to warmly introduce our special guest, Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson. She's a renowned therapist, CEO, and recently new author, here to join us. Come on, bring her up.
Well, Dr. Archie is not here yet.
She's not
Okay.
here yet. That's okay. I'm going to read her little bio. I'm going to give you some information about Dr.
Yeah,
R.G.
I'm excited.
Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson recently published her first book, very exciting, Courageous Conversations. Courageous Conversations Connect, a pathway to reset your mindset with intentional thoughts from the inside out. Isn't that a beautiful title? I love it.
Absolutely.
Dr. Allen Wilson is a national television and radio personality. You may have seen her on some of the Today Show major segments. I know I've seen her on Fox 29 all the time.
Mhm.
And she's just a frequent guest in the fourth hour with Hoda and Jenna Bush on the Today Show. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Mel Robbins Show. Okay, she's famous. Tamron Hall Show. I need an autograph. Are we paying her? All right. So as we wait for her, maybe we can just start some conversation amongst ourselves.
Right. And I just want to say, not only is her bio impressive, but
Very.
she's just pretty dope. When you see her, she's pretty dope. There's no other word for it. Her whole flow, the way she carries herself, it's done in excellence. And we need to see more women, more
Yes.
women part of the BIPOC community that represent in excellence. How many of you know that God is looking for excellence in everything that we do?
Amen to
Very
that.
well.
And we come to you on today. This is no different. We come to you in excellence because we understand in order to get something to you, that it has to be served properly. You wouldn't go into a restaurant and order a plate of food and want it delivered to you on a garbage can lid,
No.
right?
That's right.
You want it presented and laid out nicely, as Katrina said in the last chat. Laid, you want the table set properly. You want
Absolutely.
everything in its right place, and we come to you with that on today. And this is a very, as Barb said, this is a very sensitive subject. Mental health is a sensitive subject. People don't even like to mention the word mental without being offended. So it's just a privilege just to even share in this topic. And we don't come up with these topics just, we don't just come up with them on a whim. It takes prayer behind this, and it takes a lot of thought and consideration on what can we give to the people, and that's you. So please participate on tonight. That's all I had to say.
So I say, without further ado, let's bring them, Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson. Come on.
Yes. Welcome. Yes.
All right.
Did I
I
mention
told y'all she was dope.
Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
yes.
Dr. RJ, I don't know how much of this conversation you've heard before you came in hot, but we were just singing your praises, but we were just going on and introducing you to our audience.
Well, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I'm so honored to be here with this illustrious panel of young women, young Black professional women, and I'm just excited about the title. It's really what I committed my life to in terms of elevating the awareness and education around mental health and wellness, in particular in our communities. And so I'm just happy to be here and have the courageous conversation with you ladies, and
Yes.
believing in God, that this message will go out to whomever it is meant to reach, and that people will even be healed by the conversation and be empowered to continue the conversation on mental wellness, especially for us as women. But we can't forget our men, because they're going through and
Oh,
struggling too.
amen to that. Amen to that. So to get the crowd warmed
Awesome.
up a little bit to you, Dr. RG, I'm, looking at you, clearly, our people, we look wonderful. And when I read that you have with over 20 years experience as a relationship therapist, I said, huh, she barely looks 25, 30. So
That's
please, please
absolutely.
share with
What's
us,
the
what you
secret?
will, about your illustrious career thus far.
Oh my goodness! So thank you for the compliment. I'm, they say black don't crack, so that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
However, I feel a little bit older than 25, because I've been doing some things. I've been doing some things in the community, and I've been honoring, I believe, what God has called me to do. And so, a short thumbnail, and I like to share this story because I feel like I was a therapist before I was a therapist,
There
right?
you go. Yeah.
I A lot of times what we are called to do, oftentimes God will put us in a position to realize that journey even before we actually move into that particular industry or that profession. And for me, I was just this little girl that was curious. I was curious about
Mhm.
people. I was
That gets
curious
into
about my own family. I was curious about the dynamics. I didn't have the words for it,
mhm.
but I understood like there was something about relationships that I wanted to learn more about. And in fifth grade, I had a teacher, my favorite teacher, Mr. Pizzo, and I asked him a curious question as a fifth grader. The curious question was, why are these little boys? There were two little boys in the classroom with me, and I was like, why are they so bad?
Mm.
And he was like, well, I don't know. Why don't you tell me what you think is going on? And I said, my mom said that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So maybe they don't eat breakfast, and maybe that, makes them feel a little uncomfortable. That's why they act out. So he
Mhm.
said, okay, well, what do you want to do about that? And I said, well, can we like just go to the grocery store? That's where you get the food from, right? And like, can we just bring it back here and cook breakfast for them? And at that time, I guess there were no rules around that, because we went to the grocery store. He got a hot plate, and
All
he
right.
said, why don't you invite them to breakfast? So I did.
Okay.
And so they came to breakfast every morning. I didn't even tell my parents. I was just like, I gotta go to school early. And so after a couple of weeks of doing that, they started walking me home from school.
Okay.
When they started walking me or home to school, home from school, and I invited them in to do schoolwork because I was very like brainy and sort of an intellectual even back then. Invited them for schoolwork to do our homework, and my parents are like, "Who are these boys?" I'm like, "Oh, these are my friends. We eat breakfast at school in Mr. Pizzo's office every day, and or his classroom." And lo and behold, my father started to take them home to their houses. We had a whole process. What do I say about that?
Yeah.
Out of all the accolades that I've ever gotten, right? And I'm actually about to be awarded an illustrious legacy award at Drexel
Yeah.
University. Out of all of that,
I'm gonna be front row.
the first, thank you. The most important award that I believe that I've ever gotten was the Humanitarian Award in fifth grade for believing in
Oh,
these young boys that they actually could be elevated to a level of greatness. Again, I didn't have the language. All I knew was that if I cared about them, if I showed them that something
Right.
great would happen. And so I think I was a family therapist before I was a family therapist. And I was
yes.
creating connection in our community, looking at what was happening, and then trying to figure out the solutions to resolve the distress. And here I am many years ago, many years later, not
Yeah.
even 25 years, much more than that, years later, still doing the work of the people and trying to help us to have mental health and wellness. And so
That
that's
is
just
beautiful.
a little story
Absolutely.
about where my journey began. I went to Howard University, go Bison, then went to Drexel University, go Dragons,
Dragons.
and just continue to try to do this work of breaking the stigma and shedding light on a people who need mental wellness and need to be aware of the things that they can do to be more well.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing
Wow.
that story. That was a
Thank you.
wonderful testimony, and you definitely are walking the path that God wants you to walk. Absolutely.
Wow.
And we're so happy to have you with us tonight. And without further ado, I did want to ask you, and I'll probably ask you later, what keeps you doing this work? Because your energy is off the Richter scale. It's
Absolutely.
wonderful,
Mhm.
but I know this work can be hard, right? But it is helping people, and that's why probably all of us are here. But I think we should jump into it, and
Yes,
I'll be
yes.
on the tail end. So I'm going to throw the ball over to Katrina to kick
Oh,
off the first question.
yes. We throw the ball a lot, Dr. Wilson.
It's
So I'm
okay.
sure you'll hang right in there with us
That's right.
on tonight.
Catch it.
So
Catch
yes, there's
And do you
so
prefer Dr.
many.
Wilson,
Yes,
Dr.
yes.
RG? What do you want us to call you so we can be?
It doesn't matter. It's fine.
Doesn't matter.
Okay,
Doesn't
all
matter.
right.
Doesn't matter. Wants a question.
Awesome. So, as we all know, tonight it's there's a lot of layers to this. I just feel like there's layers to this on tonight. And it's important that we just share that with our audience because we want
Right.
the questions, we want the responses. You're gonna sit home and peel back your own layers. Those who are watching a replay, dive in there, take something from this, something that pertains to your healing. Is that fair to say, right?
Yes.
As it
Very.
pertains to your healing. So the most important question, the first question tonight, is why is mental health so stigmatized in the Black communities?
And you can even add on what
Yes,
is mental
yes,
illness in general, just to kind of open that up, and then you can just jump right into that if we want
Okay,
to do it.
that's a great question. And so we'll start with like mental health in general, right? Because I think that that's something that we need to understand and normalize it. The way that I like to normalize it is that I've yet to meet a human being that did not, over the course of their journey here on this planet, get a common cold, right?
Right.
Never met one, right?
Mhm.
Because we're susceptible to the elements in the community, in the world, right?
Mhm.
And we are all connected, mind, body, and spirit. And so when you talk about mental health issues, I've also yet to meet an individual that has traversed this journey here on this planet without a mental health issue, right? And there's different layers of mental health issues. And so there can be depression, there can be bipolar disorder, there can be anxiety, there can be panic attacks. There's certainly deeper levels of mental illness that many of us experience. But what I also want people to understand is that a lot of times it really is because we are humans. We have different chemicals flowing through our body and through our brains, and often a mental illness can be due to chemical imbalance, right? Not always, but a lot of times. And so if we can normalize it and sort of begin to lean into the reality that mind, body, and spirit is all connected, therefore we begin to shed the layers and shed the stigma, because we all know that we could potentially be susceptible to layers of mental health issues. It could go from mild, something like mild depression that's event oriented. Maybe you've lost a loved one, or some, or you had a breakup or lost a job, something that, grief can be an expression of loss, and that could create more depression, if you will, to moderate or severe depression, which means that you just don't want to get out of bed. Or, quite frankly, for a lot of Black women, they're getting out of bed and doing all the rudimentary things that they would normally do, but they're still not feeling well. They're still feeling blue. And so we want to unpack that and then begin to help people to understand that there is help. And to add to the second part of that question, because I did it in verse, well, why are we so stigmatized? What is the issue with that? Why do we not want to have these conversations? As I like to say, these courageous conversations. The book that I have is called Courageous Conversations Connect. And it specifically starts the first chapter with radical self-care and action, because we need to begin to have these conversations. Well, what's the deal about the stigma? Well, historically, we as Black people in particular, or women, or any marginalized group of people, we have not been treated so well in the mental health field. Oftentimes we feel like we got to leave our religion at the door. We got to leave our humanity at the door. We don't necessarily connect sometimes with people who don't look like us. And there is a disproportionate amount of clinicians and therapists that look like all of us on this panel. And so as a result, oftentimes we will shy away. There's another part to that too, which is that our demographic, in particular men, Black men and women, often have sort of gotten a negative message, right? From generation to generation. Like you don't air your dirty laundry in public. How many of you all have heard that one? Right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, you don't talk about the family business. And so we've been socialized that if we got a problem, we need to keep it to ourselves. Or we're told, and this is a big one I'm sure many of you all have heard, go to Jesus. You know, you don't need a Jesus, you don't need a therapist if you got Jesus, right? But God really provided us with the intellect and the capital and the fortitude to develop ourselves in every profession. So one wouldn't say get a broken arm and say, okay, I got a broken arm, all I need is Jesus, or I'm just going to go to my pastor. They might pray and go to their pastor, and their pastor is going to pray with them, and then they're going to send them to the ER to put a cast on that broken arm to mend it, right? And so it requires us to go deeper with the historical trauma and the residual effects that many of us have experienced, quite frankly, with 402 years of slavery and social injustice and racism and inequities, to fully understand why we shy away from this topic of mental health and wellness. Now, I will say, in the final analysis of this question, the tides are changing. There has been a pivot, and we are raising the conversation about this, and we are breaking the cycle and the stigma. We still got a long way to go, but it's conversations that you all have created, like in this platform, that are helping people to really evaluate their thinking and say, oh, maybe I could get a therapist. And maybe if I get a therapist, that doesn't mean I don't love Jesus.
That's right. That's right. I love Jesus and my therapist all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Faith without works is dead. And the Bible says that. So you can have faith, but you can also add the works to it and do the work.
That's right.
Do the work. Yes.
God is a man of science. God has created the heavens and the earth. That's science. You know, that's when you think about creation. You know, God has created us and made man in his own image. We are creative beings. We are created in his image. So if he has that type of care, and I love how you gave your story, Dr. RG, about the young man when you were younger, how this was a calling on your life, even when you were a child, you know, which reminds us that what's from the heart touches the heart, and it doesn't change. And only God can deposit that in you.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
I like one of the comments that came in about taught behavior. And Dr. Wilson just spoke about the generational, you know, we're just taught to be a certain way. So I do see that this might be the generation that breaks that. This was the generation that's coming through the pandemic. And so they were possibly more comfortable with, you know, speaking about what they need and, you know, unpacking those feelings and those emotions. So the generational thing, I think, is big. Like you said, especially with our community, we go by what we were taught, and you would not dare ask the question why you were taught a certain way. You just operate out of that habit. So that was a great comment that just came through.
Thank you, Janice Parks, for that comment.
Well, I wanted to add this piece that, you know, especially with regards to generational, whatever you want to call it, generational curses or generational cycles, we're taught as therapists to look at the transgenerational cycles and patterns that get passed down from generation to generation. And, you know, it doesn't, every time when I do a therapy session, when I first start, I will do a complete genogram. That really just is a family tree. And I will go back up to 4 generations or 5, depending on the recollection of my client. And one of the things that has taught me is that cycles repeat themselves, right? And sometimes we then relive the behaviors of our past generations. But if they repeat themselves, we also can be restored. And those cycles, we can change them or break the cycles. Now,
Right.
how do we do that? What we call it as clinicians, family of origin or FOO.
Okay.
There's a term that I coined called FOO fighting. It's in my next book. It's called FOO fighting for a reason, because your family of origin impacts you or us, right?
Right.
Earlier, longer, more frequently, more powerfully, and more profoundly than anything else.
Mm.
That's your family of origin,
Right.
what you learned, what you
Mhm.
downloaded, what your
Mhm.
blueprint is, what those messages are. And
Mhm.
before we ever step foot in a classroom to
Mhm.
learn English and history and mathematics and science, we're actually learning from the people that are in our immediate environment, our parents, our grandparents, our
Right.
siblings, right? And that
Right.
messaging, when you think about a child, the messaging gets downloaded in us. And that is
Right.
why it's so ingrained. We're
That's right.
learning how to be in relationship. We're learning how to manage our emotions or not manage them.
Man.
We're
Yeah.
learning the art of forgiveness, right? We're learning all of these things, and we repeat these cycles, right? From
Right.
emulation. Because
Right.
think about this: many of you, I think there are lots of parents on this platform, right? Well,
Right.
if you watched your children, there's one thing that you watch them practice over and over again, right?
Right.
There's this image that I have with my nieces that they watched when the parents were walking on all twos, right?
Yeah.
This is a thing that we've learned, and we walk on twos. We move forward if we're able to, right? Unless
Right.
you have some other ability, if you will. And the child is walking on fours, right? They're crawling,
Right.
really.
Right.
And then they look up at the parent and they're like, I can do that. They don't have language for that, but
Right.
they're processing what I see you doing, I want to do.
Mhm.
And then they begin to try to do it. And they stand up, and then what do? We say, come
Yeah.
on,
Come
you
on,
can
baby.
do it, you can do it,
Yes.
right? And they
Yes.
start walking, and then they fall, and then they start walking, and then they fall. And we like, you got it, you got it. And we give them affirmation. And as soon as they kind of get it after a lot of practice, then they start doing it because
Right.
they saw it,
Right.
they
Right.
emulated it, they
That's right.
practiced it, and now they repeat it, right?
Right.
So think about that. That's just a simple thing that we all do that we don't really think about. And we don't even think about, well, how did we teach that child to do it? But really more is caught than is taught, because we
Right.
didn't give them language and say, this is what you do, because they didn't understand language at that time.
Right.
They watched it,
Right.
they saw it, they
And
emulated it, they
that's right.
repeated it, and they practiced it, and then they repeated it.
They
Well,
learn the behavior, right? They
Right.
just learn the
Right.
behavior.
How
That's why
many
it's so
other
important.
behaviors are we teaching them?
Right.
Mhm.
That's why
What
it's
they're
so
watching.
important what they're exposed to, and what we expose one another to culturally, not just within our families, but within our culture. Have we set a culture that says it's embarrassing to say that you feel like you need to seek
Mhm.
help, with a situation that you're going through? Is it okay to share? And like you said, Dr. RG, we've had a culture of, what's done in the house stays in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So culturally, we don't share those things. We're not in a situation where we want to share the things that I call are important, the things of the mind that are important. How often do we share even feelings? We talked about yesterday how, even when it came to discipline, some were spanked, and you were told, don't cry after spanking.
Mhm.
Right.
Agonizing pain, you're told not to cry. So
Mhm.
culturally, some of us have built that tough exterior of, it's not just what I saw, but it's what I was told.
Yeah.
The examples that were before me in the household that instilled in me, and anything you do for a certain amount of days, it becomes second nature to you. And I
Mhm.
think that's a big part of it also, that we've been following an
Right.
example of those that I'm not, I'm going to say it this way, that have been ignorant to this side of things, and for those, it's either been the embarrassment, or it's been, I really don't know much about this, so I'm going to shy away from it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Thank you, Celeste. You You kind of coincided with exactly what Denisha just
Interesting.
mentioned in the comments. Thank you so much, Denisha Bridges. Yes, the doing without the explanation. I would even say it's safe to say, Dr. Wilson, that a lot of our concerns that we have, we don't even recognize what was toxic. We don't know. So this is why we need a therapist to tell us what was toxic and what was not. Because, like Denisha said, and Celeste was saying, doing things without, and we carry that on without explaining, yes, do as I say, not as I do. But there are some deep wounds, there are some deep issues that have happened and there was no explanation. And as a child or growing up, you're just thinking, okay, you're bigger than me, you're in charge, I have to. But some of those traits were definitely toxic. And as I'm sure we all know, we carry those over into relationships. So how can we, or do we know when to even say we need a therapist, given the fact that we don't even know that our traits are toxic?
Right. Or appearing weak. Janice Parks just chimed in again, being the strong Black woman.
Right.
How do we do these things without appearing weak? Because we've been taught you don't cry, you stand. We go through adversity with our shoulders back and our head up high. Don't let them see you sweat. Fake it till you make it. These things have been drilled into us, especially as African American women, because even you see in paintings and pictures of us holding everything on our shoulders and holding everything on our backs, going back to slavery even. So it's definitely culturally ingrained, as you said, Dr. RG.
But really quick, Dr. RG, before you address that, I want to add on to what we've been talking about in being strong, in keeping it together, not talking to anybody else about it. But then if we get to a space where we think, okay, you know what, I do need to talk to somebody, I do need help. But then now we have mistrust of healthcare, right? We have mistrust of these other individuals, and why should I tell you, my stuff, and how do I know you're going to help me and really want to help me? Take it away, Dr. RG.
Yeah. All the comments are so on point. The cultural mistrust, as you talk about, Barbara. This I'm a strong Black woman that can carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I don't even know when I'm not okay, right? Like the subtitle of this is like how to function when you want to quit. Well, oftentimes the messaging that has been downloaded and ingrained in us is you don't cry, you don't quit, you keep pushing through, you keep burning the candle at both ends, you multitask, do all of those things regardless of how you feel or not, right? And so those residual effects that we have to deal with that are related to trauma, I call post-traumatic stress disorder, and in many cases, continual traumatic stress disorder. For some of us, we're not just dealing with the trauma in the streets, but for many professional women and men, they're dealing with the trauma in the suites. So it's almost like no matter where you go, you can't hide. It's like a shadow. If you've ever walked and you looked at your shadow, wherever you go, the shadow goes with you. And that's kind of, in many cases, how we feel. And so then if that is the messaging for us as Black women, if it's the messaging for Black men who are dealing with a different kind of trauma, but it's all connected, right? Because, we talk to our children about the talk, but we don't always talk about our own internal anxiety of what we feel when our partners or our sons or our family members walk out the door and they don't know if they're going to come back. And so dealing with all of that trauma can be quite a large task if the message that you have inside of yourself internally is that I can't give myself permission to feel.
Right.
Wow.
Right? That's the message. So if you can't give yourself the message to the permission to feel, then how do you know what you need and when you need it? And that's what this conversation is all about. It's like creating a platform to help people to understand and be more educated about when it is that they can be more preventative versus reactive.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot to think on. And it's almost like, we are expected to be strong and sick. You could be at the same time. And I don't think that should be. If you're sick, so what? Just be strong. And I think there is, I'm sure there is a better way to uphold ourselves and a better way to move forward with these conversations just like this.
Well, when you juxtapose those two words, strong and sick, one of the things that I want to help us to understand is, like, we've all gone through COVID-19, right? We actually all went through the intersectionality of two viruses at the same time. COVID-19 came out of the blue, right? Maybe for some people, those persons that have been in that science field, it wasn't out of the blue. But for me, it was out of the blue, and many of us, we thought it was going to last for 2 weeks and we'd be back to business as usual. And now it's 2 years later, right?
Right.
And then simultaneously on top of that trauma, and we all remember when we were probably looking at the people in China and we're like, ooh, we're glad we're not over there. And then before you know it, it only took a couple of weeks and it was over here, right? It probably was here when we didn't know it was here, right? And that's also kind of like mental health issues. Sometimes it's here, it's in our community, it's in our families, and we don't even know it. So that was one virus, COVID-19. And then the other virus was all bearing witness to the George Floyd moment, right? And George Floyd moment was like Emmett Till, right? It was like you got to see up front and close and personal what the virus of racism looks like, even though we feel it every day. I think that there was something about the fact that we were all home collectively together dealing with this unknown that made it more traumatic to us all. Right. And so when you juxtapose those experiences with these concepts of strong, right, and then sort of sick, well, what does that really mean? And what do you need to help you? Like, what is the spiritual foundation and the resources? And I use resources as an overarching theme because I've yet to meet a person yet that didn't need help from someone who's sick mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, relationally, familially. If those areas are compromised, then we need additional resources to help us to resolve, treat, provide, help, if you will, in therapy or in the mental health field. There's a couple of different iterations. There's talk therapy, which is what I do. But then there's also psychiatry, which is medication, which, by the way, there's a stigma for the people in our community around medication too.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, well, and I'm not going to get into this political conversation, but do we really know what's in that burger that we ate down, at that store down the street?
You mean McDonald's? No, did I say that? No product placement. Sorry.
So, Dr. Argy, do you think the barrier is navigating, or the inability to navigate, the healthcare system for the Black community, and the access and the cost? Do you think that's a major barrier for the Black community?
1,000%. 1,000%. There's education, but then there's cultural mistrust, right? A good reason for cultural mistrust, because when we do finally get access, let's say we do finally get in the door, then we're not heard, we're not listened to, or we're rendered invisible, or we're rendered silent, right? We're saying, and then there is this underlying implicit bias that we don't experience pain. We're so strong, we don't know when we're experiencing pain. Our threshold is, larger for pain than the average.
Where does it come from?
Oh man. But I say, D, talk about it. Oh my.
I've had some really bad experiences with healthcare workers. And I always say, I don't care. I'm 5'8". I don't care how statuous I look in person. Treat me like I'm an adult, but with the pain, treat me like I'm 5 years old, because I'm going to feel that. And if you don't numb me doing a breast biopsy, if you don't numb me doing a biopsy of my uterus, I'm going to feel that and I'm going to scream. And stop telling me not to scream, because those are sensitive areas where there's all nerve endings. And so where are y'all getting this? And then to find out, I could have been sedated for all of that. And that was never an option you gave me. So,
well, that is where we need to with our collective power, begin to change policy. We need
Right.
to shift the medical, health system and the mental health care system with regards to insurance. We
Yes.
also need to really begin to fill the pipeline in these educational institutions that basically bring in people that look like them and not look like us,
Right.
because we will be, in many cases, more sensitive to our lived and shared experience.
Right.
And we need to
I was gonna say
advocate
that.
for ourselves and for each other, so that why we would ask the question: why is maternal health,
Right.
the disparities of maternal health,
Yes.
so much higher
Yes.
with regards to the inability to get services for Black and brown women than white women?
Right.
Yes.
Why?
Right.
We're women, right? We
Right.
have babies, we give birth, we're vessels, and so
Mhm.
we should be, as you're saying, Dee, able to share with our healthcare practitioner that we are in pain, and they should believe us. And
Mhm.
we should always have someone to partner with you when you are in these situations where you're in pain and you can't even speak because
Yeah.
you're in such pain. You need to have somebody right by your side. I've been an advocate for lots of people, including my own mother. And I know that
Mhm.
when you're in that position of vulnerability, you need somebody that will, have that internal power and that fortitude to not back down,
Yes.
and even strategy to
That's important.
to navigate system. Because you start pissing folk off the way you're talking to them,
Yep.
then oftentimes then they will say, well, okay, well, I'm not going to
Right.
help your loved one. So you got to
Right.
have strategy, you got to have facts and data and
Yes.
strategy, and you have your empowerment to show up and to advocate for yourself and your loved ones. And the
Right.
fight continues.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
always say, where is humanity in the healthcare system? Like, we're people. Like, take your eyes off of what we look like and the color of our skin. We're all people, and we want the same services that everyone else gets. We want the same help. So,
We are deserving of the same
yes.
help.
Yes,
I
we are.
think that we have to remember that while we are not in other parts of the world that are certainly not doing well these days, some parts of the world,
Mhm.
we have to remember that even in the location where we sit, and while we have the freedoms to even have this conversation on platform, this system wasn't designed for us.
Mm-hmm.
The system
Absolutely.
wasn't designed for us. We couldn't vote. We had no rights, no human rights. We're still listed, Black and brown people in the Constitution as 3/5 of a human. And
Mhm.
so when you say, where does this come from? There's a lot of work to do to begin or continue the healing process of
Right.
seeing us all as human and equal with equal rights and social justice.
Right.
That very thing that we're
Mhm.
talking about, walking around in a human form, mind, body, and spirit, and recognizing that people don't view you as the same. Like,
Yes.
you're going to be stopped for driving while Black, or
Mhm.
drinking while, or you can't drink coffee while Black, you can't drive while Black, you can't golf while Black, you can't go to the hospital while Black. There are
Yes.
so many things that we internalize that cause the trauma and the stress, and ultimately increase our cortisol and our adrenaline levels. And when we're
Right.
getting constant doses of that, then it causes our systems to not function, to use the word in the presentation today.
Mhm.
When you're functioning but you want to quit, well, our
Mhm.
systems sometimes want to quit
Yeah.
this body, because we're not able to have access to the
Well,
same rights as everyone else.
Right.
everyone else.
Dr. Archie, you talked about access and the resources. Just being in the COVID season, while many people think it's over, it still exists.
Mhm.
We're seeing so much more anxiety, so much more depression. What's your take on the fact that we now have access now? We're now more aware, but therapists and those that work in this profession, they're overbooked now.
Oh,
They're overbooked. I mean, what do we say to those even after this conversation? Like, I have access. I'm aware now. I know what to do. I'm recognizing this. I know something's going on. This is not a I'm okay, you're okay situation. What
Right.
do I do?
So that's a great question.
Yes.
Because just like the medical institutions, the nurses, the hospitals were overrun due to COVID, right? Water rises to its level. I knew that the aftermath of this, pandemic was going to impact the mental health field. And so it has. There was not enough of us. We're mostly booked to capacity. So now you have this level of awareness, as you're saying, Pastor Celeste, and now there's not the resources. So what is one to do? Well, then we got to get creative, right? There are schools, and every single school, university that has a psychology program or a marriage and family therapy program, they have interns that need to learn. I know this because I was responsible for 12 years for all of the clinical placements for all of our master's level and our doctoral level students. When they have those, we had a state-of-the-art clinic. And at the time, we couldn't even get clients sometimes. And it was free. Now, while I'm not somebody that's been practicing for 25 years, those students, master's level and doctoral level, they are supervised by people who've been practicing for many years. And so I would encourage people to start getting creative if you can with trying to access those kinds of resources, because many of them are available. Those students need to be trained. And so when we're a college town, there's a college everywhere. There's not as many colleges as churches, but there's a lot, in this tri-state area. So that's one mechanism. Using your spiritual connections. If you can't get a therapist, then a spiritual advisor, a pastor, a minister. A lot of churches have ministerial ministries, council ministries, and from my
and they're certified.
Certified.
Certified counselors, and for some of them, they're in training. And then they're also wonderful ministries. I was the servant leader for the sexual abuse survivors ministry for 10 years at my church. And that ministry still exists today. And you didn't have to be a member of that church to participate in that ministry. And so looking, again, being creative. Was it therapy? Wasn't therapy? Was it therapeutic? Absolutely, 1,000%, right? Because we connected the spiritual realm with the theoretical realm. And it was very powerful. So those are resources that you can, look at to be available to you. And the last thing I would say is that there are some scenarios where if you're not in the state of severe depression, let's say, it's mild event-oriented depression. There are some things that we actually can do, principles and properties that can help us to heal ourselves. And I see the life coaches, somebody else to that question, but there's nature. Philadelphia is a beautiful city. And springtime is a great time, unless you have allergies, to walk around in nature. Beautiful running streams, the breathing. In COVID-19, people are having difficulty breathing. What I do is, in most of my sessions and a lot of my coaching, a lot of my meditation groups, I have people do deep breathing, because sometimes what we think is a person having a heart attack is really having a panic attack or an anxiety attack. When breathing gets short, if you start getting oxygen into your body, then it changes the parasympathetic nervous system, allows your body to breathe, and it allows you to calm your spirit. So there's some things that we can do, and journaling. I highly recommend it for everyone to have like a gratitude journal that balances things out, and then a processing journal. Because what happens is when we're taking in all this trauma, we got to have an exit point. We got to be able to externalize those thoughts, those feelings, and those emotions to create more space. Because if we don't, then as it continues to go in, we become like a hot air balloon. And eventually, the balloon is going to either pop, it's going to burst, explode, or implode, which is where the depression comes from. So those are some resources.
You help me. You can write the bill. You send the bill to
Right.
Yes.
So let's address that question in the chat.
Yes.
What is your view on life coaches in lieu of therapists?
So that is a tricky question.
I love that question.
It's a great question. It's a great question because it's right on the heels of talking about resources. I think that there are some great life coaches out there.
Yes.
I think that there are some great therapists out there. I also think that there are some crappy life coaches out there.
Yes.
And some crappy therapists out there. Which all leads us to doing your necessary work to explore, to ask questions, to see if it's the right fit, because you are the consumer. So you really want to know where that person's training was from. I don't believe that one should just hang up a shingle and call themselves a life coach.
That's
They
right.
have done some certifications and some, a deeper level work. And by the way, I personally would never go to a therapist that had never been to a therapist, right?
That's right.
That's interesting.
That's right.
Why do I say that? Because we are charged with a calling of listening to people's trauma all day, hour after hour after hour. We have to have our own mechanism for well-being, and we have to have our own person to process whatever experiences, because in addition to doing the clinical work, we're humans. We have our own issues, right? But at the same time, you don't want somebody to be coming to you and then your issues are bleeding out all over the place and they can't get the help that they need. And so you want to be able to go to people that are actually not perfect people, because there's no such thing, but people that have done their work, their training, they are well equipped to work with that particular demographic. And you want people that are actually, have a foundation and stable enough to do the work with you.
And Dr. RG, would you say that, life coaches could be effective, the best ones, maybe even the worst ones? But if I'm someone who is having a mental illness that requires, a psychiatrist, it requires really that clinical support, maybe I should assess what my need is before I determine that my schizophrenia can be dealt with by, life coach. You know what I mean?
You might need both. I think I said in our conversation last night, if I was having a heart issue, I wouldn't go to a podiatrist.
Exactly.
Right? Because you want to make sure you're lining up the right person for what your particular need is. And so if you're having a severe mental health issue, then the person as a life coach may not be the best fit for you. On the other hand, I've seen people that had both. They had a therapist to help them deal with their mental health issues, and then they had a life coach to kind of really coach them through. Think about the terminology of coach. A coach is somebody that they prepare you for whatever issue, whether it's be your professional career, whether it's a life change, but they're going to kind of be very methodical in the details of what the here and now and what you want going forward. Whereas a therapist is peeling back the layers of the onion. They're understanding the root of the issue. They're connecting you with other resources that might be helpful. For example, you mentioned, Barbara, that a psychiatrist. Well, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't prescribe medication, but I have some psychiatrists on speed dial. And I have clients that I feel we've had a conversation. I had a client in particular for quite a long time. And I was trying to encourage her, because of her severe anxiety and depression, to consider medication. And she just was not down for it. She just, she had so many negative messages in her family about medication. It literally took about 4 years. And by the time she got to a place where she really felt like she was sick and tired of feeling that way, she's like, all right, Dr. Argent, I'm going to give it a shot. Well, it took a couple of months once we got her to the right person, but she is absolutely a completely different individual with the combination of doing the talk therapy and the psychotropic medication.
Wow.
I would never recommend the medication without the talk therapy. I feel like you can do the talk therapy and not necessarily need medication, but if you're doing medication, I recommend that you balance that out with the talk therapy.
Right.
All right.
We also have another question, Dr. Archie.
Questions.
Oh, go ahead.
Denisha,
Lots of questions.
Said, when searching, I can't make out that part, but how do we go about, and this is also...
Well, they're asking about an intern. I think the intern is someone who's in training. And so the idea is the intern is working under licensed professionals, and they're going through a training process. And so they're going to be able to be effective when they finish their internship. But I don't know that we want them to actually serve the community in the absence of another licensed clinician,
but she's
over their purview.
She's also asking, how do we go about and find one that is Black? She's in California, and which is very diverse, but she's saying they're scarce, and I find this even to be with some doctors at times. And as a mother, I'm going to bring in the teenagers, young adults in here somewhat, because I think that's important to mention them too. We've been talking about women, but the young adults, they've gone through a lot since COVID also.
That's
And
true.
I think it's on a whole nother level. And it's just shut down their systems in so many ways. I'm a mother of 2 sons who are young adults. And if they needed to go and seek someone to speak with, I'm thinking I would want them to go to a Black male, preferably, because I would think that they would need to speak with someone who understands them to their life experiences, their shared experiences, really. And that I find even more difficult, not just finding if I needed to find someone, but now I'm looking for someone for my Black son, which I think is a whole nother animal in itself.
It is. It is. And so to address the woman in California, California has a large demographic of therapists, which is the good news. The bad news is that there are not enough of us that are going into this field and that are getting properly trained. And so when you're now in a situation like you were talking about, Pastor Celeste, where you have Black sons and you're trying to cherry pick in some ways the right fit for your son so that the therapy can be effective, it can be really hard. What I would say is, just like anything else, you don't give up hope with trying to get more and more information as it relates to, like, the woman asking about the interns. You look at schools that have a commitment to diversity, schools that not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. You can literally, before you ever look at the content, go on the website of the school and look at who their faculty and their upper executives are. Look at where their representation matters.
That's
and
right.
when you have people at the table that look like us, the hope is that they then create and set the stage for bringing in student body that is diverse too, so that you've got diversity up and down, that system. And if you do, then more than likely your hope you'll be more successful when you're looking for interns of color. Don't be afraid to ask either. When you call and you're saying you're looking for services, don't be afraid to say, like, I'm looking for a clinician of color. I'm looking for a male clinician of color. Do you have anyone within your system that could, work with my child or work with me, if you will? People come to me all the time, and oftentimes if they get to me, and we've been very overwhelmed lately with providing services since the pandemic. But if I can't provide the service, then I usually am willing to try to find a good fit for them. There's some barriers. If they want insurance, I don't take insurance. So I try to refer them to other practices that take insurance. If they want a Black male, I'm certainly not it. I'm not, I can't accommodate that. But I do have a short list of Black males that I can possibly refer to that I know are very well trained, but it's a very short list. And so we're just trying to do better work at bringing more people into the pipeline, because at some point, even at my level, one day I'm going to retire. And this is why mentorship is so important to me, because I'm trying to mentor the next generation of clinicians so that when we're no longer doing this work, there will still be others that are out there doing this very important work.
Very true.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent.
So it sounds like the first step to answer the comment and the question is you can do your own research. You don't have to just take what somebody's giving you. Do your research, connect with others who may have some kind of expertise in this field, and keep searching until you find the right fit. We do it for everything else, for our clothes, for outings, for functions. Do the work, do the research so that you can be comfortable, because it seems like when you do find the right therapist, that it will be a lasting relationship and a beneficial relationship for many things that may come up that you may encounter.
Absolutely. 1,000%. And then make sure that you talk to people who have actually been in therapy. Ask them who their therapist was. Ask them to give you their information. If you get there to that person, and lots of people come to me, my biggest billboard is word of mouth, right? And once they get to me, if I'm not the best fit, then maybe I can refer them to who I think is the best fit.
Right.
And I just want to add that I do work in the healthcare field, and if someone needs help navigating their health plan, Pastor Celeste, you can refer people to me. I can help them navigate that system, because that's very important. Because therapists sometimes aren't cheap. which
Mhm.
rightfully so. You've worked very hard to earn those credentials. Sometimes those health plans really can come in very beneficial. You can get
Right.
5 6 sessions, but you really need to know how to use your health plan, know how to navigate that system. And I'm happy to help anybody on this call.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent question I see there. Are there any professional organizations that people can www dot go to that's at least a gateway resource for those looking to do the research to find someone?
So
Yep.
CBH,
Yes, CBH.
they will have a list. If you go on their website, of all the various resources in the city of
Community
Philadelphia.
behavioral health.
It's really very, very helpful in terms of this tri-state area. I know just as in the future, this will be in existence, is Mental Health First Connects. It's our new nonprofit. And the goal of Mental Health First Connects is to connect people to resources. So that's forthcoming. But right now, I think going to CBH and looking at what they have on their website could be really helpful.
Great. And Janice Parks just chimed in and said Long Island, New York has a Facebook page called Black Long Island, Black LI, which
Okay.
has become a great resource as well. That's good. It's good for all our New Yorkers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for that advice.
Okay.
We definitely will spread the
You
word
got
on
people
that.
on Long Island, you got people in California,
Mhm.
you got people
Right.
watching everywhere. That's
That's right.
awesome.
I know this is good.
Thank you. Thank
Philly,
you.
New Jersey.
Much needed.
All right.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Philly, Jersey, tri-state area, Delaware. We have people coming from all over.
Great.
Dr. Archie, I just want also for you to touch on the opportunity to have online therapy sessions for those that are not
Yes.
familiar with that.
So, that's something that was happening before the pandemic, but now, because there was a shutdown, really the world shut down, and we still wanted to provide these services, and we recognize that therapists are essential workers, they relaxed some of the guidelines so that we could continue to do the therapy online. Now, some people weren't like with it because they weren't sure whether it would feel authentic and whether it would feel real to be sharing your most personal history on a screen, if you will.
Mhm.
But I think that after 2 years of us doing it as therapists, we've gotten pretty good at really helping clients to feel like there's some huge benefit, and we're still going to get the work done as long as we partner up with what the goals are. And there's some benefit with regards to just convenience. People don't have to leave their homes. They just have to sit at their computer, get the link, get good Wi-Fi, and you can still get this work done. Or if you are part of a family, or maybe you're a bi-coastal relationship, you can still do work, and you don't have to do therapeutic work. You don't have to be in the same location. So I think it's been a wonderful addition to the field, if you will, to allow people to get their needs met and still not necessarily have to travel. Another thing I want to make people aware of is there's a new, sort of new in this area. It hasn't, not new in California, but there's a new system that we're operating under called ecotherapy, where we're actually doing therapy in parks and outside in nature. And it's really, I became a part of it because, after doing therapy for a year on the screen, I needed a little bit break from the screen. So I have quite a few clients that I go to the Arboretum Park, and we just walk around, or we sit, we take breaks, but in that hour, we're taking visitation from nature, and we're still getting the work done. So that's really another opportunity to have the courageous conversations in therapy.
That's
Wow.
beautiful. I love it.
That's awesome. So just from that, I'm learning that there are some non-traditional ways to receive help, to get access, which is awesome. I just have to ask the question, and I think I'm asking it for the viewers. I feel like they have a burning question.
We do.
I want to ask the question because our topic was on tonight, functioning when you want to quit. And just in case somebody didn't hear it, just in case somebody just logged on, what does it look like when you are functioning? What are some of the signs and symptoms that you want to quit? Sometimes we verbalize, sometimes we don't. What, in your expertise, what are some of the signs and symptoms of someone who comes to you and they are functioning, but they want to quit?
And can I add a part 2 to that? Dr. Archie, real quick.
Uh-huh.
They're functioning, they want to quit. How do we approach them when we notice it? If you could just add that
Mm.
B clause to it.
That's
Yeah.
nice. That's
So
nice.
I would say like that, as when we talked about last night, that we know that the depression rates have gone up.
Yeah.
We know that domestic violence has gone up. We know that the suicide rates are going up. And so when you say, are you functioning but you want to quit, that could have multiple meanings. You just want to quit your job, you want to quit in life, you want to quit your relationship, you want to quit, I don't know, just church community. Like, there are multiple ways that people say they want to quit. And how I internalize that is that they just don't want to experience the pain, like they're hurting. And
Numb.
so they just kind of want to numb. They either have become numb or they want to become numb and anesthetize themselves, but yet they're required to keep pushing and keep moving and put on that mask, right? It's interesting that people were so upset about wearing mask mandates. And what I was saying was, well, people have been wearing masks for a long time.
That's
Put on that smiley face and they say, too blessed to be stressed, knowing all the way that they're really, really stressed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important for us to look at what it's available to those persons, and to answer the question continue to ask specifically is if, and Pastor Celeste, if you notice it in somebody, what do you do? And if you actually notice it in yourself, what do you do? Two very different things. So we're talking about awareness, noticing in yourself. That might mean that you have to begin to have what I like to call the courageous conversation with yourself that something is not right.
Right.
What are the signs and symptoms? There were things you used to do that you don't do anymore. There are things that really made you laugh that don't make you laugh anymore.
Wow.
There are relationships that you felt they were really great relationships, but they don't bring you joy anymore. The things that you once did, you just are checked out, or you're doing things, or engaging in risky behavior just to like anesthetize yourself or distract yourself, weapons of mass distraction that are really not in your best interest. So as I had said before, I want to show everybody this book, Courageous Conversations Connect.
Yes.
The first chapter talks about radical self-care and action because it forces you to have a courageous conversation with yourself. Like, self, is this how I want to show up in the world? Is this what God intended for me? Am I being kind to myself? Am I being kind to others? And if the answer is no to all of those things, then the next step is, all right, well then maybe I do need some help. Maybe it's time out for suffering in silence, and that I need to begin to shake the trees, talk to somebody, people DM me all the time, DM somebody and say, listen, do you have some help, resources for me? I need something. It is really okay to ask for help when you feel like you're struggling, even if, because this is what we do all the time. We go to regular doctors and all we really want is preventative care, with the hopes that in that preventative care, we've done enough screenings to give us good news. And then we can go on our way, right?
Right.
So if we had one session with somebody and they said, you know what, it seems like you could do these things and you would be good, great, then go do those things. But if you do meet with someone and they say, there's room for a lot of work here, and let's begin to process the steps to get you to a healthier place. Now you can begin to roll up your sleeves, right? The opposite is sort of true for if you notice a friend, but in reverse. Having your conversation with yourself about, how do I approach this friend so that they're not upset with me when I tell them that I'm seeing something that is uncomfortable. Doing your proper research so that when you do have that conversation, right, that you are equipped with information to give them, for them in love, to say, take a look. When you feel comfortable, at least you have that information. And then if you're ready, I'll go with you. Because that's what we do in church, right? We say somebody's going to give their life to Christ. Who wants to walk with them? Well,
exactly.
Say, I got this.
Exactly.
I will be with you. Those are the things that I think are important to begin the journey And the beginning is not the end. That's just the beginning. The hardest part is starting. And then once you're on your way, you can begin the journey of health and healing.
Amen.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
I think that's a wrap for tonight.
That's a wrap.
Thank you, Dr.
Sweet.
Archie. We appreciate
Yes.
you coming in. Can we get one more plug for the book? So those that want to reach out, and where can we get the book? Oh, where can we get the book?
This is the book, Courageous Conversations. You can get it on Amazon.
We put the link in the chat.
People can see it. Our viewers.
I hope so.
Yeah, it's on there.
Okay.
Yes. We want to make sure that we support Dr. Archie. She is an incredible resource. She's an incredible resource for me already, and I just met her, and we know that tonight that she's been a blessing to all those who have tuned in on tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Archie. If we can do anything to help you while you're doing this great work, please don't hesitate to reach out to the ladies of the chat. Whatever we can do for you, we are there.
Dr. Archie, do you have a website that people can connect to?
Yeah, they can go to drarchieconnects.com or connectionsmatterllc.com. Either of those will take you to the same website, and that's where you can find my information.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we thank all those that are even coming into the rebroadcast of this. Thank you for all those who had questions on tonight, and we thank you for your participation. Next month, somebody say next month.
Next month.
May is our 4th episode before we go on break for the summer, and our topic is outgrow. How do you let go when it's time to when you have outgrown people, places, and things?
Wow.
How do we let go? How do we recognize it? The topic is outgrow. Thank you for tuning in to the chat, chatting it up with us on tonight. Real life conversations on everyday conversations on real life issues.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful week.
Stay, RG, stay.